everyone, it's Simi Shah, and welcome to Trailblazers. On this podcast, I dive deep into the journeys of trailblazing South Asians, sharing the stories of the leaders and dreamers lighting the way across the South Asian diaspora. It's hard to believe that we are already at the conclusion of season 6. This marks 3 years, 6 seasons, and over 60 stories told. But don't get worried just yet, because South Asian Trailblazers is just getting started. And I'm here to tell you about the exciting way in which we're starting season 7. On Thursday, July 27th, 2023, South Asian Trailblazers is headed to Boston, Massachusetts, where I'm going to host a live podcast event with a dynamic duo. Dr. Vas Narasimhan, the CEO of Novartis, one of the top 5 pharma companies in the world, and Dr. Shruti Gupta Narasimhan, a longstanding physician leader, former McKinsey director, and board advisor to companies across health and education. This year alone, we have hosted live podcasts from Atlanta, DC, and New York City. And we're so excited to be headed to a new city in Boston and what is both my and our guests' old stomping grounds as Harvard alumni. If you're interested in joining, head to our website to get your tickets at southasiantrailblazers.com and feel free to spread the word to friends. This is going to be an incredibly exciting event, and I can't wait to meet some of you there. Now, for our season finale, I'm sitting down with the one and only Shruti Rya Ganguly, filmmaker, producer, and writer. Shruti has several claims to fame, and I'm going to start by telling you about a few of them. She's produced several feature films, including Spirit Winner H and Nora Ephron Prize winner Initials SG. Her films have premiered at all the major film festivals, including Sundance, Venice, and Tribeca. And she was also a part of President Obama's ECHO Committee, which stands for Entertainment Creative Collaborative Outreach Program, where she worked alongside 30 leaders and creators in entertainment and chaired its Asian caucus. When it comes to her repertoire, of late, she has directed Tripped Up, which will be distributed by Decal and Universal Pictures. She recently sold Death Spa, a psychological horror film, to Sony International, and is currently writing Secret Daughter for Amazon Studios, which will star Priyanka Chopra. As if that wasn't enough, on the TV front, she is writing a TV series called Brown Baby, which will be set up at Apple UK, and has also been developing a half hour with a comedian, Carrie Cadet, called Flossie. Shruti has directed and produced commercials, branded content, short documentaries, and music videos for the likes of clients like Nike, Netflix, Unilever, and Michael Kors. And this is all through her own production company, which she started a few years ago, called Honto 88. Previously, Shruti was an executive at Nylon, MTV, and Condé Nast. Her additional recent projects include co-founding Prism Entertainment to craft South Asian-focused films and television series, and also serving as co-founder of the Resistance Revival Chorus, a collective of singers born out of the Women's March. Shruti received her bachelor's from Northwestern and went to NYU to complete her dual MFA and MBA. She hails from India by way of Oman. And as you guys can guess, we have a lot to talk about today. So Shruti, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Simi. It's nice to be in such great company of other people you've interviewed who are people I look up to and our friends. They're not exclusive.
I appreciate that. It certainly feels like a long time coming. I feel like I've had the opportunity to glimpse into your journey, obviously through the public sphere. And so really excited to have a conversation today, specifically about your work as an award-winning filmmaker and writer. And I want to take it way back to the beginning. What sparked your initial passion for storytelling and the arts? And was any of it rooted in the formative years you spent in Oman?
Gosh, growing up in Oman, it was a really interesting and wonderful place. it was also the type of thing that I didn't really know a lot of people who worked in the arts, and anyone whose kids left to go to college in the States or the UK who made choices to have careers in the arts. I went to an Indian school in Oman. I went to the Indian school Muscat. And as is typical of schools that follow the CBSE system, after 10th grade, you decide if you're going to go into science, commerce, or art. And I just think that the arts, unfortunately, in Indian culture, just based on the education system, if you don't get good enough grades to fit into the science and math categories, science and commerce categories, that then at least you can go into the arts. It creates this impression that you were just not really great at school. You were probably distracted. That was the vibe and the attitude. And I really enjoyed school, and I was this real nerd. And I also loved the arts. My mother was constantly telling me, master of none, master of none. You have to pick something and stick with it. I love sports. I studied Indian classical dancing. I did Bharatanatyam. I did Indian classical singing. I did track, tennis. I painted constantly. But, we were growing up in a culture where we're expats, and it's not necessarily like we're engaging with the local arts culture or know how to. I then went to boarding school in India, in the Himalayas, to an international school called Woodstock, because I wanted to also expand my access to more analytical thinking. Because really what we were good at in the school that I went to was we were very good at very fast memorization of lots of information that we would quickly forget as soon as our exams were over. So I wanted to kind of expand my way of thinking. And I think I was really able to do even more in the general arts practice, where it was theater, and then I'd studied piano and I was doing that. And then I did Indian flute and choir, lots of sports. But I never at that point, while I loved painting, I really thought I could focus on painting as my profession. At the same time, there was this notion that, well, you're good at school, you're good at math, you're good at economics, go study something more significant. I really wanted to come to the States and go to art school. And I wish this wasn't so stereotypical, but my parents said, absolutely not. We're not sending you to college in America to go to art school. And I went to Northwestern and I did economics and painting at first. I didn't even realize that film was going to be my medium then. I used to grow up going to the movies in Oman with my dad, and we would just be immersed in these incredible Hollywood experiences. And it just felt so distant from anything I could ever be a part of as someone who had a lot of creativity and ideas. I just didn't know anyone who's doing it.
Wow.
I'm going to take a breath there because I can keep talking, so you just have to stop me.
Okay.
But to quickly summarize, I feel like I explored my creativity when I was younger in different forms, particularly music and painting. And it was only in undergrad that I realized that film could be the medium that I could focus on, where it combined so many of my interests across art forms.
Absolutely. And I want to spend a second on that, because you've spoken about how you had these early experiences, including internships in banking and advertising and journalism while you were at Northwestern. Some of them obviously have a storytelling, media-oriented bent to them, while others, like banking, are in a completely polar opposite realm. Can you talk about that inflection point where you realized media and film could really be your field and your medium?
Well, I was so motivated when I was younger. And I had even interned at the National Bank of Oman before college in investment and retail banking. And then after my freshman year, I interned at Ernst & Young in Oman. But then something happened where my cousin sister, Pooja, who had made the arts her career, while for me, the arts were my hobby. And we had grown up in Oman together, and her family had moved back to Delhi, which is where we're from. Pooja, it was hard for me to turn on the television without seeing her in a commercial or choreographing something. She was doing theater. She had a show on Channel V called What Women Want at 18 or 19. She was India's rising star. And I felt like I don't need to make the arts my career because my sister does it. But I remember my sophomore year getting this call from my father telling me that my cousin Pooja had been killed in a car accident with her friends.
Wow.
And that was when I really felt like I had been cut in half. And that's when something shifted. I just remember going to class and I was like, I wanted to scream out to all of these students, you don't know that my life has just changed today. You don't understand. Everyone was kind of going about their day because their lives were like the day before and mine was not anymore. And I think it kind of set me on this, like, from someone who felt like she had the answers, who was incredibly motivated. I spent that subsequent year very confused, which was very unlike how I had been. I think it was very confusing to my family as well. They had never seen me like that. And I think it was exactly a year after my cousin died that I had clarity. And I was like, we live once, clearly. And I don't think I've been brave enough to figure out what I really want to do. And I think I have to just try things that make no sense, that sound interesting, that spark something inside that I'm curious about. And I just started taking classes that sounded interesting. I shifted my major. I then moved into communication studies with a business minor, and I continued painting, of course. And there was a visiting professor from Bombay my junior year, Vrinda Nabar, who was teaching a class called Women in Indian Cinema. I remember watching Satyajit Ray's Pathar Panchali, which is the first movie that we watched. And I'm also half Bengali, and seeing that movie, really, it was the ultimate eureka moment of like, this is it. I used to watch films as a kid with my dad, which were like big Hollywood blockbusters that were just kind of fun and pure entertainment. And I didn't actually understand until that point the impact that filmmaking could have when it came to even having an impact and possibly changing the world and shining a light into profound stories. And in the case of Pathar Panchali, you have the story of an impoverished family in Bengal that's really navigating class and caste and their economic spiral. And it's centering like young people who are just trying to survive and exist. And for me, that movie is why I'm a filmmaker.
Wow. It's interesting because obviously these harrowing experiences we have as human beings often do shift the course of our life because they bring into perspective what matters to us most. But I also feel like we live in a world where, even if with what happened with your cousin and sister Pooja, it's a short-lived change. What gave you the sort of temerity to feel that this was your path in the longer run and to stay on that course and truly pursue it?
I just remember how my heart fluttered when I watched the film. I'd never had that feeling before. So I knew I had to lean into it, but I didn't know how to. There were not a lot of people I knew who worked in the film business. And I remember when I told my parents, I'm going to make films, I'm going to be a filmmaker. My dad was like, we did not send you to college in America to go make movies in India. They couldn't understand it. And I think that those statements were also coming from a place of fear. Like if I wanted to go into consulting or finance or things like that, they knew people that I could possibly intern for or like get a job, through. But in this medium, they really didn't know how to help me. And I think that's really a lot where those statements came from. And I can recognize that now. I did have a friend who had also gone to my boarding school in India, who had also grown up in Oman. And she was the one filmmaker I knew. And she was about to direct her first film. She actually wanted me to act in it. I had done a lot of theater in high school and not very much at Northwestern because I thought I was so weirded out by theater majors. And I was like, nope, not interested. And she really wanted me to act in her movie. And I said, I don't want to act in it, but can I work on your film? Can I learn?
Oh,
and
wow.
She was like, sure. And I did this weird thing, which I guess you're not even supposed to do at Northwestern, but I somehow created an independent study project. And I went to Bombay for the fall of my senior year and was writing papers on my experiences and on different essays on various topics. But I remember when I arrived in Bombay, and I didn't know Bombay at all, Ruchi Narayan, the director, was like, "Oh my God, you know nothing. You've never even been on a movie set. You need to go sit on my friend's movie and learn something." And so I then was thrown onto the set of Chameli with Kareena Kapoor and Rahul Bose, and it was directed by Sudhir Mishra. And I was just running around with the assistant directors. I was like the intern AD, and that's how I was learning. And I remember my second day in Bombay, the family friend's nephew was sound mixer, and he said, "Oh, you're in Bandra? Why don't you just come to the recording studio?" I'd never been to a recording studio before. And I meet these three guys called Shankar, Ehsan, and Loy.
Oh my gosh.
And I have no idea who they are, but they're like a really big deal. And I think they were so entertained that I was so clueless. And I was like, "So what do you guys do?" And they're like, at the time, the biggest musical directors for Indian films. And they were quite funny. And I will never forget, Loy and Hassan were like, "Oh, wow, you know nothing." And that was kind of the thing that a lot of people were totally stunned that I had shown up in Bombay without any clue. But I left 3 months later, armed with even more awareness of, this is it. This is my medium. This is what I'm going to do. But then, of course, I come back to Northwestern, finish school, graduate, decide to move to New York because I had interned there one summer for Reuters and Newswire. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but how to do it in New York was a whole other story, especially after 9/11. To try and get your visa sponsored was not an easy thing.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I know that in the subsequent years, you were working for nonprofit organizations, but also creating videos on the side. And you eventually joined Nylon magazine as a video producer, where you made an impressive 200 videos in under a year. Talk to me about those early experiences moving to New York, knowing what you wanted to pursue, but figuring out how to do it and get your foot through the door.
I think that if there's something you really want to do, you have to want it so much for yourself, because no one else is going to make it happen for you in quite that way. And it was really hard the first few years in New York. I think I was crying and quite sad a lot because it was so hard for me to get my visa sponsored. And one of my first jobs was at Island Records, Island Def Jam, in a division called New Media. That's how long ago it was. Now it's simply digital. But at the time, it was called New Media, and that's where I had an internship. And it was unpaid, but it's one of those things that you're trying to do random stuff to make cash while having these free internships at name places. But a few months after, they were like, "Oh, Universal Music is not going to sponsor visas."
Oh, gosh.
So then I went to a hedge fund, and I was there for a few months, and they were like, "Oh, we're not going to sponsor visas." Then I got into a rotation at HBO, and my OPT time, your 1 year allowance, my time was running out. But I'm at HBO, and I then get told, "Hey, we're going to sponsor your visa." And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is insane. They're going to sponsor my H-1B. And then one of the HR people calls me to her office, and she's like, "Actually, there's a gap between when your H-1B can start and when your F-1 visa ends by about 3 months. And essentially, you're too low on the totem pole for us to hold that position because these people need an assistant now." So they retracted my offer.
Oh my gosh.
And I was sitting in an edit of 6 Feet Under. We were working on a special for 6 Feet Under, and my face was hot with tears. And this was like the third time the door had just shut in my face again. And I had been working so hard at each of these places. And in the meantime, I had just been volunteering with this nonprofit that had a music focus. And they had a big annual fundraiser called Hedge Fund Rocktoberfest, where hedge fund guys who had bands could perform, which was such a genius idea because everyone needs an excuse to kind of bring out their inner rock star, I guess, even people in finance. And so I then went to that nonprofit and I said, "Listen, I'll get a lawyer. I'll pay for it. Can you sponsor me?" And they were like, "Sure." And they had no idea what they were doing, but I got a lawyer, did all the paperwork. And that's kind of why and how I started working in the nonprofit space in New York. It was where I could get my visa sponsored. And I had grown up with my mom doing a lot of social justice work in Oman. and in India. And so it felt like a very natural connection. We always kind of grew up volunteering.
Sure.
But yeah, that's how I ended up working in the nonprofit space, while then kind of self-taught music videos and videos that went viral. And it took me a few years before I would then get to Nylon. But it was because I had directed these like spoof videos that got attention and press. And I thought, oh, wow, any video you make should have millions of views. And I mean, that was a lucky start.
Wow. You then pivot to Nylon, and then eventually you decide to go back to school to pursue your MBA and MFA at NYU. Why the pivot back into education?
And that's a great question. I think I really love environments that have organized learning with other people. And so I really do love the classroom setup. I think at that point, I was in the video world at Nylon when video was so new for magazine brands and media companies, and it was really growing. And I remember having this conversation with Smriti Mundra, who's a very close friend, and she was getting her MFA at Columbia. I had gotten in to NYU, and she really asked me what type of filmmaker I really wanted to be. And I would say that she and my brother were two of the most instrumental when it came to helping me make that decision. Because I was like, I have this incredible opportunity and I'm making so much stuff, but I think I wanted to kind of grow in a different way. And the thing is, I don't think you should ever stop yourself from applying. Always apply to grad school if it's something you've always wanted to do. And then when you get in and then you're kind of like, oh, shoot, now I have to make a decision. Yeah. Then you have to kind of go for it. But I remember the first few weeks in the dual master's program, and I was the second year of this dual program. So it was still, we were the guinea pigs. And I remember starting out at Stern and I was miserable. And I hadn't found a replacement at Nylon. So I was working and I was at school full time and I was covering Fashion Week while coming into classrooms where everyone was so focused on their finance jobs. And I was just like, what is this decision that I made? This is a terrible thing. And I was really considering dropping out.
Wow.
At that point, 6 weeks into grad school. And we did not have a connection with Tisch at that point. The program when we started was like 1 year of the business school. And then the summer you would do an intensive at Tisch of screenwriting and like filmmaking for 6 weeks. And then you would spend your second year at the grad film program. And then the third year was divided between both. I think since the program is like a lot more integrated now, but that's how it's divided then. And I remember getting a phone call from the admissions office or an email from them saying, congratulations, you have won the Kenshin Oshima Fellowship. And I was like, what? I thought that they had got the wrong person. So I write back saying, thank you. I think you've sent this to the wrong person. And they're like, no.
That's so funny.
You have to come to the admissions office and we'll explain. And I'm sitting there with Paula Goldfarb in the admissions office. And she tells me that essentially the Kenshin Oshima Fellowship was for students who either in the second year of business school would be getting the highest GPA up until that point, and they would have a semester or a year paid for. Or for the first years, any incoming student was eligible for this fellowship, and 2 people would be selected because of their specific interest in furthering Asian culture and representation, whatever their line of work is. And so that suddenly felt really exciting to me. And I was like, oh, wow. And, I think when you get a semester of tuition paid for, you're like, oh, shoot, I guess I got to continue. And so that really helped me stay on. And I love business school. I really love film school. I work a lot with my film school classmates. And I think it was definitely one of the greatest choices I made for myself. Having that space to study and build connections was invaluable.
Well, to your point, while at NYU, you meet fellow classmate, actor and filmmaker James Franco and have the opportunity to then start collaborating with him, developing projects for his production house. And from my understanding, this opens the door to projects like The Color of Time and Yosemite. How did that collaboration come about? And can you share a bit about the projects you worked on together?
Absolutely. So James Franco was the year ahead of me. And he was going to be teaching a class on adapting poetry for the screen. He had selected a handful of students in my year, as well as some students who were still part of the thesis program. So they had finished their official coursework. And I love poetry and I really wanted to do it, but it was full. I was too late. And I remember asking a professor how on earth I could even sit in on the course. And they had given me James's faculty email, essentially. And I was like, oh, Hollywood actor is certainly not going to respond. So I write and I say how I love poetry and how much it's meant to me and why. And, if there was a way I could at least get on the roster for this following semester or something. And James wrote right back and said, there is no space. However, I am looking for a TA if you would consider being my TA. And then we can definitely find a place for you the following semester. And I was like, absolutely.
Wow.
That semester, essentially, James had the rights to a collection of poetry by C.K. Williams called Tar. And the assignment he gave to the students is each of you take one of these poems and write it into like a short 10-page script. It was so interesting because it was in the process of adaptation. And the assignment was also like, go out and make these short films. And then we realized that there were similar characters, there were recurring themes. Wait a minute, these are different scenes from a person's life. We can make this into a feature.
Wow.
And it became this very ambitious homework assignment, essentially school assignment, where we ended up really rethinking it as a feature film. And we went to Detroit. We had a couple of weeks off from school and we had 2 units shooting simultaneously. My first movie had 12 directors that I produced. It was a very low budget thing. I even drove one of the equipment trucks at one point from New York to Detroit. You just are going to do everything. It's not very glamorous. And it was very, very hard experience. But somehow, when you think about it, we made this movie, this kind of wild, wacky movie that stars James, Mila Kunis, Jessica Chastain, Zach Braff, Bruce Campbell, Henry Hopper. And the movie, we got Cinetic Media to be our sales rep, and then Stars is the distributor. And it's crazy to think that it was just really a homework assignment that we just somehow made happen. But it really taught me a lot about collaboration. And I think knowing what I know now about producing, if a project like that ever landed in front of me, I wouldn't even touch it with like
a 10-foot pole.
10-foot pole. But I think because there was so much not knowing that we were just going to get it done no matter what.
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes the naivete we have about the way the world works is what often pushes us to pursue opportunities we might not have otherwise. And so I appreciate you highlighting that because it's a reminder that being naive isn't the worst thing at times. It seems that in working with James Franco and these superstars, you really get thrust onto the main stage into a whole new echelon. Would you say that's true? And I'm curious how you've grappled with that in light of the allegations that came out against James Franco in the wake of the Me Too movement, especially given, I imagine, that in working with him, you really saw yourself rising and getting the opportunities you always craved. But I'm curious how you've reflected on that over the past number of years.
I think it's definitely a double-edged sword to be working with a very public person. You have incredible access, of course, and a lot of revelry amongst actors who also want to grow and help each other out. At the same time, eventually James was also going to be called out during the Me Too movement, which was like, a big shock as well, and a very challenging thing to navigate when one was reading the news like everyone else. And so I think that at the same time, his company had sponsored my O visa, which really helped me get to be in America to do this work as a filmmaker. But I know that independent film, I think it's really difficult to sustain yourself. And so I think while I was making movies with Rabbit Bandini, his company at the time, I still really liked being an executive. I loved my nylon job. And I then took a job at MTV Desi, to try and revive MTV Desi for the third time. And it was awesome to focus more specifically on my South Asian community and my own personal culture and find interesting ways to do commissions and to collaborate with different folks. Then I went to Condé Nast to rethink the content for Vogue, and 73 Questions was the first series that I produced when I got there. So I was finding a way to kind of still work in film, and it was incredible access. And I think that really helped me as an executive as well, because when I was at Condé Nast and like, for me, for the talent, I wasn't just like a video person. They looked at me as a movie producer who worked with actors, who had that trust. And so I think we had a different approach together. And that, I think, helped. As a filmmaker, the key thing to doing a good job, I think, is trust, centering trust in relationships.
Absolutely. Now, as you said, you graduate, you have this opportunity to work in movie production, but also take your skills to MTV and Condé Nast. And then in later 2017, you founded Honto 88, your own production company that has since ventured into various formats from narrative and documentary to series and branded content. What motivated you to take that leap, and what have been some of the challenges and rewards of it?
So I was building a career as a producer really well and was getting a lot of different opportunities. And I then started working with another couple called Rania Atiye and Daniel Garcia, who I still collaborate with very closely. And our films went to Venice and Sundance and Berlin and so on. But I also wanted to direct myself, and those opportunities were not really coming because you're a producer. You can't do both. You can't do it all. That's what I was constantly being told. And so in a way, I had to start a production company to reframe things for myself, where the company could really represent the things that I wanted to make while also supporting the things that my friends wanted to make. And so I remember I was producing a movie called Green Dolphin by writer-director Chris Kenneally, and Keanu Reeves was our EP. And there was an announcement that was going out about it. And all the other producers who were white men had production companies, and there was just me as myself. And I thought, damn it, I need a production company.
Oh my gosh.
So suddenly my company name gets announced in like the Hollywood Reporter, and I don't even have a website. And I suddenly, I think, bought a website domain, was like coming soon. And I was like, I guess I have a company now.
Wow. And what is the genesis story behind the name?
So Honto 88 is actually the name of my condo building, hilarious building in Chinatown that I've lived in for too long. And when I dug into the meaning of Honto 88, there's one translation which is live life to the fullest, but in conversational Japanese, it's really. And I think that in many ways, that's the spirit of the company, where we do meaningful work, but we also won't take ourselves so seriously.
Wow.
And 88 is a number for infinite good luck in East Asian culture. And so it is very specific to a place and to a memory. And I always think of my Chinatown apartment as the place I came home to after grad school, the place where I wrote things, the place that somehow has been like a hub of inspiration for me. So it feels like a base for the company in many ways.
Wow, I love that. That's so interesting. And it's interesting the ways in which the duality of the meaning is very powerful. Can you speak to some of the most meaningful projects that have come out of Honto 88 in the past 5-6 years that you've launched this company?
Wow. We make film and we're involved with television and we do commercials and music videos, and we made so much stuff. And I would say that I directed my first feature last year, and I was attached to direct that movie for 7 years before we even went into production.
Wow.
And my company does get a credit in the end. That was really exciting because it's going to open in theaters across the US this fall with Decal, which is Bleecker Street and Neon's new US theatrical, and then opens internationally with Universal next year. And it's an ensemble comedy called Tripped Up, starring Leah Lewis, Ariel Winter, Vanessa Williams, Ashley Moore, Sasha Fox, and great cast. And I'm really proud of that. It's amazing, the writers and the producers of that, the commitment to the project and to each other and how we stuck with it. In terms of some of the short form content, we've worked a lot with nonprofits like the Desai Foundation or Commit to Change. And I think that balance of you can make an ensemble comedy, but then a few days later you can be in rural Gujarat, as a 2-person team. I think that's really important to me to do that. And I think the greatest work, are the repetitions of clients in those relationships. So we work a lot with the same clients, whether it's the Huntington Learning Center or the Desai Foundation or Commit to Change. And I think for me, that's really important. It was really exciting to direct the campaign for Netflix's Golden.
Yeah.
When that was coming out, and that was a really fun project to do. And I think we have a really interesting and exciting slate of things coming up, even on the documentary side. I'm directing a movie on Floyd Cardoz, directing a documentary on Asha Butli, incredible singer. I have a project on Jennifer Glover, who is an incredible security guard at America's top nuclear defense or research facility, who was an important part of the Time's Up movement.
Wow.
When it came to seeking justice for herself and for other people. So we're in the midst of post on that. And then I just directed a short on the incredible activist and organizer Shirley Sherrod that we're also in post on. So there's such a range of things. And it's hard because I think I kind of approach each project at the company, because it's such a small company, it's only a handful of us, we have to kind of figure out how to manage our time. And we find great partners to keep working with.
Absolutely. I want to double down on that, because even just as you were speaking, and when I look at the arc of your journey, it astounds me the numerous ways in which you've been able to work with and alongside many Asian creatives, South Asian creatives. And I know most recently you filmed Bollywood actress Alia Bhatt's preparation for the Met Gala, where she was outfitted by Prabal Gurung. You co-hosted the South Asian Excellence at the Oscars event. You've had this opportunity to elevate organizations like the Desai Foundation, which is actually run by one of our other trailblazers, Meka Desai. Can you speak to these moments and what it's been like to have the opportunity to collaborate with others in our community, and anyone and any single project that's had a particularly big impact on you?
I think that there's incredible visibility for the South Asian community right now, and that kind of collaboration and coming together. But at the same time, we also have to keep ourselves in check. We have to hold each other accountable. We can't take any of it for granted, and we can't pat ourselves on the back. Community always requires work. It's often quite exhausting. It can be thankless, but at the same time, you have to do it to not ever capitalize on it, but because you truly
care about it,
want to see people come together. And I think that some people, unfortunately, lean into community to kind of capitalize their own gain. That is not the perspective from which I operate. I've been doing this work for way too long. And I think that is just a reminder, is beyond the photographs and the access, especially with Hollywood, that there is more work that needs to be done to support each other and to elevate each other, to hire each other is a really important thing, I think, for our community, and to not operate in that model minority myth or the fact that there's room for only one, and
scarcity
to allow
mindset.
Ourselves to, we're going to screw up. We naturally will. No one's perfect whatsoever. And there are mistakes that we're going to make, and we have to kind of make adjustments and move ahead. For me, this year, doing the South Asian Lodge at Sundance was really incredibly important, because I've been a Sundance alum and, quite involved with their various programs. And so that for me felt like a really wonderful space to really bring people of all, let's say, points in their career together.
Sure.
Of course, the event that's the pre-Oscar celebration, I wish everyone could be invited to this thing. But, when you have sponsors and you have budgets and you have very limited spaces, it's hard to accommodate everyone. And so I think it's just also really important to work on creating spaces where everyone is also welcome and that things should not always feel exclusive, because then they can kind of generate the wrong support also.
Absolutely.
Or attitude. Like people get upset and you're like talking about building community, but then you're building like exclusive walls. And then you have to really, I think, be conscious of countering that with things that are a lot more open and welcoming too.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting because I feel like that's a unique burden that obviously a lot of communities of color face, because there are, to your point, limited resources, limited access, limited spaces for us. And so even as we're trying to build, we often encounter obstacles within our own community. From your vantage point as a writer, producer, director, filmmaker, what more can we do as a community? And obviously the South Asian community has gained so much momentum in media, broadly speaking, over the last several years. But from your unique perch, where do you see we can push the needle even further, whether by us or by others?
I kind of really double down on the hiring. When you have an opportunity to hire or support South Asian stories, do it. That's really why Prism also came together. Priya, Giri Desai, and Megha Kadaki are filmmakers who I respected for a while. And we kind of just came together during Zoom and we're kind of had the same complaint about our representation and about how we were being asked to consult on projects that were really problematic after the fact. And we were like, we're really tired of that. And you know what? We can kind of come together and build a slate and build things in a way that also feels layered and complex and not these like cut out characters of predominant Indian Hindu narrative.
Absolutely.
And so I look at Beef is, I think, truly one of the greatest shows that exists. And I can't stop talking about it enough because I look at that film and what it's done for representation, but just like incredible storytelling. The fact that even within that particular East Asian community, you have people from so many different backgrounds. And when that gets revealed is fascinating. And I can't wait for us to have shows like that. I can't wait for us to make movies like Minari that are these beautiful, poignant immigrant stories that just allow you to breathe through an experience. I think it's coming. I think we're going to see that. And I'm excited for stories like that.
Absolutely. As am I, and I'm excited to see you make them and produce them. In the realm of Prism, it's so clear that you really seize opportunities to partake in institutions and opportunities that bring arts to the fore from a multicultural perspective. And to that, I speak to your involvement as a member of President Obama's Entertainment Creative Collaborative Outreach Program, chairing its Asian caucus, as co-founder of the Resistance Revival Chorus, which is a group of singers who uplift and center women's voices. Could you speak about these experiences and what it's like to sort of use your skill set to dabble across these different organizations that are elevating different voices and giving you the opportunity to work with other leaders and creators?
I mean, I think I kind of channel a lot of my feelings towards action. So like rage is the feeling I felt soon after Trump was elected. And I remember I think collective complaining is probably a healthy thing. And how I met Priya and Megha was like our collective complaining about certain things. And that's how Prism started. And I was sitting with filmmaker Paolo Mendoza and activist and performer Sarah Sophie Flicker right after they had organized the Women's March. And I was like, I'm so upset. I don't know what to do. What are you doing? What can we do? And they said, hey, well, actually, there's a group of us who are thinking about starting a chorus. I'm like, I'm in. What does that mean? How do you start a chorus? It was such an amazing thing. I think there is no harm in fully admitting what you just do not know, but what you can do to add value. And I think with the chorus, I've just been a student. Yes, I'm considered a co-founder, but I have so much to learn from the other founders and from each and every member who use their voice and use song to elevate necessary resistance. So I think storytelling through song is really powerful. the other Resistance Revival Chorus co-founders interacted very closely with Harry Belafonte when they were doing the Women's March. And he said that when the movement is strong, the music is strong. And so that was kind of one of the ways to come together. And I think the thing that's also really important is to center joy in all of these movements as well, because it's exhausting. I just organized an event called Howdy Democracy, which was a reaction to what is happening in India, to Indian democracy. And I think Indian democracy should always be kept in check. According to some organizations like the VDEM Institute in Sweden, it's considered an electoral autocracy, which as an Indian citizen is really, upsetting. Because I think we want to, as the most populous country, and yes, it's hard, we want to uphold these ideas of democratic values and freedom. But the fact that our journalists, our activists are being put in jail, their houses are being raided, organizations like Greenpeace and Oxfam are no longer in India. And I think no matter who is in power, Indian democracy should be kept in check.
Absolutely.
And so this was a gathering of musicians and writers and activists and artists. And it was a very, very stressful thing to organize because people were too scared, understandably, to participate. Some people were scared to buy tickets. But then soon enough, we had like a full bill that also included Rupi Kaur, who was the first person who said yes without even a question.
Wow.
And she was not able to be there in person, but she was like, I'm supporting. And I'm happy to highlight her and celebrate her because she's someone who's not scared. And I think a lot of fear has crept into the diaspora
Absolutely.
when it comes to speaking out. And I really celebrate someone like her who uses her platform to do the right type of work. Because I think a lot of people do kind of convenient activism and convenient social justice. And I think any type of justice is absolutely inconvenient. It's inconvenient to the people who have power. And it should be, because they have to be held responsible for,
absolutely,
very simply put, crimes against humanity.
Absolutely. I mean, look, this is yet another example of the fact that you have no shortage of projects going on at any given time. Looking ahead, what are you most looking forward to coming up? Any specific projects or collaborations?
Well, the film that I'm most excited to direct is a film that I co-wrote with Hari Kondabolu called Priya, that centers a 12-year-old in Jackson Heights, Queens, and her family. The dynamics are changing, her friendship dynamics are changing, and it's a kind of pivotal summer in her life. And so we're looking to go into production this fall, which is really exciting. And Mina Harris and her Phenomenal Media are my executive producers and very dear collaborators on it. And I'm really excited to direct that film. And it's so funny, I was having like a bit of an existential crisis and called a couple of friends who I think kind of helped me through it, where I was like, wow, I made 200 things for Nylon one year, right? And then I was like, but this year I made 4 things. What? And I was like, in terms of content, I was like, I directed a video on abstract expressionism for the Munch Museum. Then there was a project for Christie's on the collector Kristen Soyas. And then the Alia Bhatt Vogue video, and then a music video for Anna Brun. And I was like, oh my God, I've not made anything this year. And then my friends were like, okay, can you chill out? Like, you did the South Asian Lodge at Sundance. You just did an Indian democracy thing. You just launched a salon called Kinship to kind of reset the media and entertainment business. And I was like, I know, but like, I'm not an event planner. I'm a filmmaker. What? And they were like, okay, you also finished your movie at the top of this year. You delivered your first feature and you turned in your draft of Secret Daughter to Amazon. You've been doing stuff. And I have a TV show, as you've said, called Brown Baby with Himesh Patel that we are just delivering the Bible in the first couple of episodes to Apple UK. And at the same time, it is a writer's strike, right? And I'm a very proud member of the Writers Guild, and I fully support our need and our reason to strike. I really hope it gets resolved in our favor. And I support the actors who plan on striking as well. So I think the entertainment business, especially for the last couple of months, has been in a really interesting place. And I'm excited to finish the documentaries or to move forward with some. I mean, I think that I'm going to be doing a project with NASDAQ. And apparently I'm directing commercial for Japanese beef for Wagyu. I wish I was getting like a supply, personal supply, but maybe that won't be on the cards. But I'm looking forward to that. Like I absolutely love being on set and being with people as we all, are there to make something together.
Absolutely.
And I think that brings me great joy.
I appreciate you highlighting this existential crisis you had, because I think it's very clear that you're a doer. And I think for those of us who are doers, we look for outcomes. And sometimes the measure of the work we're doing can't be measured purely by that. But I respect and appreciate you highlighting that. And to that end, a question I always like to ask our guests is around advice they have for young rising professionals who might want to carve a career path not unlike yours. But I want to ask you this question a little bit differently, in that if we were to turn your life into a movie tomorrow, what's the main message you'd want to leave the audience with?
Wow. I think I would say that whatever she did, she worked really hard doing it, and that she lived with intention and purpose. Like, I don't think I can measure my work so far by the number of views or box office tickets or press acclaim. But I really hope that whoever I have had a chance to collaborate with and learn from, that we've interacted in ways that learning and those lessons can continue in whatever way. And I would say that the other thing is that she was always a student. I think the thing for me is like to constantly put myself also in check, and there are things that I'm really not good at, and there are things that I know I'm good at, and to also try and be better at the things that need improvement, and to continue finessing the things that where I can add value.
Well, Shruti, I appreciate you sharing that. I think especially as someone who is making her way into the creative space, it's always nice to hear that we shouldn't just measure the impact that we've had based on, to your point, box office views or ratings or whatever it is, but true tangible impact that we have on people's lives. It's very clear that you are doing that, have done that, and will be continuing to do that. So thank you for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you want to get new episodes straight to your inbox, subscribe to our newsletter at southasiantrailblazers.com and follow us at South Asian Trailblazers on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.